Welcome viewers to this series of lectures on modern European history. Today we are talking about colonialism in Europe. Obviously, in the earlier part of the discussion, we did discuss about some stipulations in order to have conceptual understanding of colonialism as a term. So, we largely said that it is a modern phenomena and it cannot be understood with reference to pre-modern usage of the term. When industrial capitalism arrived, say in England in the last quarter of 18th century, post that period, the developments with reference to foreign domination of distant areas and economies and the grip that European countries came to have over these areas, not only on economy but society, culture, intellectualism and so forth. That is what we are seeking to understand through colonialism. So, we in the previous lecture discussed that it has to be understood as a structured whole and not merely in terms of colonial policies or imperial policies and so forth. That would give us a very partial understanding of colonialism. Also, we discussed that it has to be understood as a distinct stage of historical development, which is located somewhere in between traditionalism and modernity, all right, but it has to be accorded its own individuality on account of various coordinates of history. Marxist historians, as you can see on your slide, tend to view colonial society as a transitional society. Well, in this view, what is embedded or what is assumed is that if it is a transitional society, then had that transitional society been given time, it would have automatically or eventually turned into a metropolis. So, Marxist historians are more wedded to a teleological account of history vis-a-vis mode of production. So, they would say that if feudal mode of production has to give way to capitalist mode of production, well, be it colonialism or something else, eventually it had to happen. And so, they would not give that much of importance to the individuality of colonialism, and they would say that in any case feudal societies do make transition towards capitalism, and colonialism happens to be located somewhere here, and that is incidental to it. Had it not been there, then also these societies would have made transition towards capitalist society, or could have developed as a mirror image of metropolitan economies like Britain and so forth. But this is a wrong assumption. I mean, there are several historians where you find such assertions being made in a very persuasive way, but for example, there are Indian historians who argue that there were potentialities in the 18th century Indian economy to develop into a capitalist economy. It is around this time that British influence came and gave a more twisted kind of future to Indian economy through colonialism or imperialism. But even if it had not been there, it could have developed into a capitalist economy because the potentialities were there, potentialities of capitalist accumulation and so forth. Anyway, so that is a partial understanding. Similarly, there is also attempt to understand colonialism as arrested growth or incomplete capitalist development. Even this understanding is wrong, because it necessarily puts colonialism as incidental to an autonomous process, or almost fait accompli kind of a thing, that feudal economies grow and they develop into capitalist economy, and colonialism just retards or arrests that pace of growth. So, again, that structured whole in which or the colonial structure the way it impacts economy and society, that impact is robbed of, that responsibility is robbed of in this kind of an analysis. So, it is much more than arrested growth or incomplete capitalist development. In fact, colonial society can be neither capitalist nor pre-capitalist. Example of permanent settlement through the agrarian relations that developed in India is very handy in this, and we shall come to this in subsequent part of the lecture. Because I'll be talking about permanent settlement, where how internal components of economy got disarticulated and from external point of view, there is linkage with world economy, world capitalist economy, but there is internal disarticulation and external articulation with world economy that will come to in later part of the lecture. Colonialism did introduce colonies to the world capitalist system, but this integration did not lead to the development of capitalist economy in the colonies. So, mere linkage of colonial economy to world capitalist system perhaps was not enough to induce capitalist development in colonial relations. What it did of course was that old structures of the colonies were uprooted. Capitalist relations of production were introduced in some spheres, but capitalist development did not take place. Similarly, there is no development of the progressive forces which could have taken the responsibility of capital formation and deployment of the same capital for more profit, and that is how capitalist developments occur. But that development in the colonial period, as you can see in our own Indian history, was not happening across 19th century. So, it is not leading to the development of a very entrepreneurial, wealthy, or you can say full of potential kind of bourgeoisie, or the entrepreneurs who could invest in progressive capitalist enterprises and take it forward. That kind of development is not happening. In fact, capitalism is an advanced stage of social development, and colonialism developed as a negative image of metropolitan capitalism. So, capitalism has to be you can say dehyphenated from colonialism. It's a different kind of phenomena that we are talking of, and through colonialism it's fallacious to presume that capitalism can be attained, because colonialism is a distinct reality. It's a structured whole of its own kind, and there is no guarantee that it will lead to capitalist development in colonial economies, although from outside there are some capitalist linkages with the world capitalist economy of the colonies that come to be forged. But there is no you can say wholesome development of capitalist spirit or capitalist ethos in colonial economies and societies. Now, there are ways in which historians have looked at colonialism in a very basic sense of the term. For example, should we be looking at colonialism as a mode of production or as a social formation? So, what is mode of production? Mode of production is the specific ways in which the existing means of production get related to the social relations of production. So, how different communities and classes in a particular society are associated with the existing means of production. And when we say means of production, it say in industrial scenario, it could be machines, it could be land, it could be labor, it could be several other resources that go into formation of value or profit. So, how different classes are associated in terms of ownership with these resources, with these inputs, with these means of production. So, that is mode of production. So, should we understand colonialism as a mode of production or as a social formation? When we say social formation model of understanding colonialism, what we mean is that we are not restricting our analysis to a specific mode of production, say feudalism, capitalism or whatever, but a social formation can have a variety of modes of production existing simultaneously, and yet it is a distinct reality. So, these are two ways in which one can conceptualize colonialism. So, historians like Hamza Alvi would seek to understand colonialism as a mode of production. So, for Alvi, colonialism is colonial capitalism. So, what happens in colonialism is internal disarticulation and external integration of the rural economy, realization of the extended reproduction of capital not in the colony, but in the imperialist metropolis. So, the first aspect of this elaboration, internal disarticulation and external integration of rural economy. This is where you can take the example of permanent settlement and what it did to agrarian relations in India, right. So, it made some zamindars as the effectively as the owners of different parcels of land, and they were given the responsibility of giving revenue, fixed in perpetuity, which was minuscule as compared to the total rent that they received, to the colonial government, to the imperial government, right. And what is the intent? The intent of this policy was that the zamindars in Bengal, where permanent settlement was put in place, would develop on the model of entrepreneurs as in Britain, and they would understand the value of capital to be invested in the industrial production or commercialization of agriculture, and by reinvesting their profits on capital that they come to accumulate by retaining more part of rent and giving away only some part of it as revenue to the state, that capital they would again redeploy in agriculture on their land for production, for commercializing agriculture, usage of machinery and so forth, and that is how the capitalist spirit will pick up. Now, obviously, this never happened in Bengal, and why it did not happen? Because capitalism cannot be mediated for sure shot through colonial efforts. Now, colonialism, as I said, is a distinct reality, and so many other factors enter into this, and there is no seamless kind of transition from pre-modern to modern or traditional to modern in that way. So, there is so what permanent settlement did was that some farms in which grains were grown, people chose to grow some commercial crop, and because there is external linkage of that commercial crop, say indigo or some other cash crop, because there is some market somewhere outside India and there is some demand. So, for quick profit they are starting to grow that particular crop and not the staple diet of say rice, wheat or pulses and so forth that they had traditionally been doing. So, this is internal disarticulation, right. However, externally in terms of exports, yes, they are getting linked to the world capitalist system because they are exporting and there is external demand for that. So, there are linkages produced, but there is internal disarticulation, and with that system not in place, whenever there is information deficit or there is some change outside India in the market pattern, or there is some technological intervention, then they are left in the Indian farmers are left in lurch, and that has led to several famines also in India. So, this is what here it is meant: internal disarticulation and external integration of rural economy. The second point, realization of the extended reproduction of capital, not in the colony but in the imperialist metropolis, is well understood. So, that does not need much of an elaboration, because in colonial circumstances the profit is garnered in the metropolis, because high value goods are created in the metropolis, and it is only low wage, low profitability, low technology stuff that are dealt with in the colonies, and therefore the maximum chunk of value creation through industrial efforts, which is the charm of capitalism, happens not in the colonies but in the metropolis. And there are several other ways and means. We will talk about the home charges and drain of wealth and so forth, where these are the mechanism by which, apparatus by which there is extended reproduction of capital, not in the colony but in the imperialist metropolis. So, the colonial economy does not quite gain much. Yet another theorist is Bipan Chandra, Indian historian. Now, he tends to see colonialism as a social formation. So, when you view colonialism not as a mode of production like Hamza Alvi does, but as a social formation, the advantages of understanding colonialism as a social formation are that it allows you to simultaneously study several modes of production that existed during the colonial period. So, colonialism is not about one particular capitalist mode of production. There could be feudal pockets, there could be pockets of slavery, bondage, petty commodity production, agrarian, industrial, finance capitalism. So, they all exist in pockets, and that is what colonialism is all about, and that's another way of looking at things. So, social formation perspective allows us to simultaneously study and understand the existence of varied modes of production that characterize colonialism, and they refuse to restrict it only as one mode of production, and that is the capitalist mode of production, like several other historians do. The social surplus is appropriated under colonialism by varied modes of production, and it is not hinged on ownership of means of production, but by exercising control over state power. So, what does this mean? So, when you have this social formation perspective of colonialism, obviously we are not talking of one singular mode of production. So, there are various modes of production. Nevertheless, in colonialism, what necessarily happens is that there is appropriation of the social surplus under colonialism. So, how does it happen? Now, presume there is no capitalism. So, an economy, independent economy, is making transition to from feudalism to capitalism. So, in that sense, what happens? How is social surplus appropriated? Social surplus is appropriated via ownership of assets. So, one who is the owner of land, one who is the owner of say machines or owner of capital, they get their share from whatever profit is generated through industrial production. So, it is hinged on ownership of means of production, but in colonialism it is not hinged on ownership of means of production. So, the British who were here did not own land or did not own factories or machines here. They made profit merely by exercising control over the state power. So, politically they were assertive, dominant, and they had come to stay, and that entitled them, or that was the means through which they were appropriating social surplus under colonialism. This is very important for us to understand. Right. So, that is the main difference so far as understanding colonialism as a social formation is concerned, or understanding colonialism as a mode of production is concerned. So, as is evident on your slide, advantages of conceptualizing colonialism as a social formation. Of course, number one, it offers better analysis of class antagonism between social strata in colonies. So, let's understand this. What does it mean? Better analysis of class antagonism between social strata in colonies. Now, had it been not a colonial situation, just a capitalist free kind of transition from feudalism to capitalism, in the Marxist understanding of things through mode of production, there are two antagonistic classes, right. So, you have the capitalists and the proletariats. Now, that is the main antagonism which is studied with reference to the changing mode of production so far as capitalism is concerned. But here, as we said that in the social formation perspective, there is multiplicity of modes of production. So, there are varied class antagonism. It is more nuanced. It's not only existing in black and white between two broad categories. There are so many shades in which class antagonism can be seen, and if we are having social formation perspective of colonialism, we can study them. The way they exist in multiple forms and shades. And not jumble it all in two broad binaries the way Marxist historians do with reference to mode of production. Second is better understanding of the roles of major classes and the primary contradiction at any stage. So, there are several contradictions happening, and yet there is some primary contradiction that is at play. And therefore, several classes that are studied in social formation understanding of colonialism, they get captured with nuances, and yet we do not lose sight of the primary contradiction. So, where is the primary contradiction between classes coming? That also gets simultaneously revealed when we have social formation perspective of looking at colonialism. Contradictions are societal / political, and they are not only in class terms, and social formation perspective of looking at colonialism allows us to also see the societal and political contradictions and not only focus on class determined antagonism of society. Amongst the theorists who initially started writing about colonialism, we have Karl Marx and Engels, who for the first time started writing around this theme, and the context was exploitative international division of labor, where the metropolitan economies are coming to have some kind of a grip over high technology, high productivity, high wage goods, and the colonies are left to do with low technology, low productivity, low wages and so forth. So, there is some kind of a international division of labor that starts happening with the coming of colonialism, and that is something that attracted the attention of Marx and Engels, who wrote about these issues. Similarly, our own Nauroji, Ranade, R.C. Dutt, they were one of the first the world over to start talking about reign of wealth with reference to British rule in India. Private transfer of wealth to the metropolis, that is Britain, in the name of home charges or state expenditure on army and civil services. So, British were here. They had the entire paraphernalia of bureaucracy, civil services, they had British army stationed in different parts of India to protect the international concern of Britain. That was not of India's concern, and yet they were extracting their salaries and all the expenditure incurred for their upkeep and so forth from Indian treasury, from Indian revenue that they were generating. There was no there was no need for it as an Indian, yet that was being done, and that is what colonialism does. And then finally, let's talk a little bit about historiography of colonialism. Marx and Engels, as I just said, one of the earliest to comment on the issues on the issue of colonialism with respect to colonial domination of Ireland. That's the context in which he started writing. Then our own Nauroji, Ranade, R.C. Dutt, as I just discussed, they started writing about drain of wealth, and that was the world contribution of the three with respect to making sense of colonialism. So, it actually was the first comprehensive critique of colonialism at economic level when they spoke of plunder, home charges, because several other parts of globe took cue from that, and they started understanding this. Consciousness grew that they were colonies and they were being exploited that way. Hobson wrote the book Imperialism. This was in 1902. Then we have Rosa Luxemburg, who wrote on capitalist accumulation. Lenin came subsequently. He wrote about imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism. This is quite famous with respect to insight on colonialism. People differ from it as well. 1920s, by the time we reach 1920s and 1930s, we have studies in imperialism coming up in Latin America, Africa, Indonesia, and by the 1960s, because most of the countries have now decolonized, they have attained independence, and successful liberation movements, particularly in Cuba and Algeria, led to some kind of a spurt in writings on colonialism, and therefore you have Andre Gunder Frank, Furtado, Sentosa, Paul Prepschitt, Paul Baran, Samir Amin, Wallerstein, Cardasso, and so forth. They are writing about colonialism, which greatly enhanced the sharpness with which we tend to understand it today. And then we have Dependency School and the World System Schools of colonialism that is spoken of. So, Dependency School says that as long as a colony which has underdeveloped under colonialism remains capitalist, economic dependency of the colony would continue even after political freedom. So, the way out is to undergo a socialist revolution. So, Indian scenario post independence can be made sense of this. It can be cited even as a critique of Dependency School, because we did not undergo socialist revolution, and yet we we came out of capitalist dependency. And then we have Wallerstein, who introduced the idea of periphery and core area and so forth. And the core is strong, periphery is weak in terms of indigenous bourgeoisie and so forth. The introduction of the category of semi-periphery is also there. And then we also have the cultural aspects of colonialism emphasized by scholars like Cabral, Franz Fanon, and Edward Said. So, that takes care of the historiography of colonialism at a very broad level. It is a very broad brush with which I have treated this, and when we get opportunity, maybe subsequently we shall build on this in a more elaborate way. Thank you.